the other side of the border, on the Mexico side, is very organized. They have what they call sentinels every mile on their side. And it's not to protect the people who are trying to come through. It's to make sure that they pay. There was a guy, who said he had a gun, and she had glass windows, and we were told to get on our belly and go into the garage. And
welcome out to God and Country. I'm Uriah Kennedy, and this is Ingrid Bettridge. We have a great guest with us this week. This is Heidi Balderree. She is a Utah State Senator, and we are excited to have her here. We were trying to get her here for a couple weeks, but she's coming in from Utah County, where you represent the west side.
correct. I've got parts of a little sliver, teeny tiny sliver of Draper, and then a lot of Lehigh, Saratoga Springs, and about a third of Eagle Mountain.
And how long have you been a senator for?
Officially since October 17th, 2023.
So it's almost exactly 2 years then.
Right. You're
Almost
right.
exactly 2 years.
It's awesome. Wow. It's coming
Almost
up.
on the button.
Yeah.
So how has it been your first 2 years in getting into the groove?
I love it. The great thing about being a senator is that there is something to learn every day. So every day, just narrowing the field of ignorance, the more I learned. I thought the second year would be easier than the first, but I had new committee assignments, new bills, and I love the challenge and I love the variety.
And what made you choose senator versus Congress or House?
So
It was just an open position?
it was
What?
an open position. So there was a midterm election. So the former senator, Jake Andrake, had resigned midterm, so before his term was over. Oh. So there was that, from October 17th until the end of 2024 is the term that I was filling. So there was a special election, 13 candidates, 12 from Lehigh, myself from Saratoga Springs. So that was fun. I came out the victor. And
I had imagined you'd had a lot of people asking you to fill that seat.
Absolutely, yeah.
With what you've all been involved in prior to.
Yeah, I had a bunch of texts come in when the press release came out from the former senator saying, "Are you going to run? Heidi for Senate, Senator Balderree." And I considered it. I had to check in with HR and legal, make sure that I could even run my former job. And then eventually when I did win, I had to resign and find new employment because we're a part-time legislature. So find something that was flexible that could work with this job.
Well, this is the fun job, though.
Oh, absolutely. This is the best job.
What do you do during the year when you're not actually in session? I mean, people don't realize how busy you are, and most of the year you're not getting paid. I mean, you get paid
Correct.
the legislative session, but there's still a ton of stuff you guys have to do outside of that.
Yes, there's a misconception that we make a bunch of money, and it's a matter of public record. We make $301 a day. That's an $8 a day increase from the first year that I was in. So we're making $8 more a year or a day. We get paid for 45 days of the legislative session. In the Senate, we get an additional 5 legislative training days, which, anytime we're doing something legislative, which is eaten up right away. So basically 50 days that we're getting paid for. And then we have 1 to 2 interim days a month, except for the months of April and July. So that's it.
And you're traveling all the time.
Yes, this job could suck up. It's vampiric. So it could suck up every second of your life if you let it. But I do have a full-time job, work for Western Governors University remotely, 40 hours a week on top of it. So I like to tell people it's about 20 hours a day during the session, and then about at least 20 hours a week outside of the session.
That is a pretty busy schedule, and most of that's virtually just volunteer work.
Correct.
Just volunteer work, because you are not getting paid for that.
Right.
You guys are answering a pretty significant number of questions, meeting with constituents, having meetings, traveling around the state, so it gets pretty busy.
It is.
Well, let's kind of go back. Where did you grow up?
So I am a political economic refugee from the state of California.
That's awesome.
You're not the first one that we have that says that coming in from California.
So I grew up in the South Bay and East Bay of San Francisco, San Jose, and then Pleasanton. I've also, my middle school years, I lived down in Southern California, Orange County, Whittier. Spent a couple years in Pennsylvania when my dad went to licensed nuclear power plants back east. Went to school in Idaho and Utah. Served a mission in Japan. So I've been around a bit. And we actually moved back to California for 4.5 years, and we lived east of Sacramento and El Dorado Hills. It's about an hour from South Lake Tahoe, 90 minutes from San
that's a beautiful
Francisco.
area too.
Yeah. So, but it's with all the regulation and taxes. It's a beautiful state, but it's certainly not economically or politically friendly.
Well, it's one of the most gorgeous states in the union. I mean, it is I go out there all the time.
It's a travesty what they've done to them.
The beaches are great. The ocean front's great. The mountains are great. Tahoe's even better. And they've just completely destroyed the state. Just completely. How old were you when you left?
Well, I left for college. So I went to college at...
So your entire elementary, junior, and high school was all California?
There were a couple years, 4th and 5th grade, where I was in Pennsylvania in Allentown. So,
Allentown.
yeah.
Oh, Allentown, too. Yeah, I know Allentown. I've been there a few times.
I only know the song.
Right.
Dead center in the middle of the state. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right next to College Town.
Yep.
Right next to...
Yep. I was young. I was 4th and 5th grade, so things I remember. We lived in a corner lot, so lots of leaves and having a snow tunnel that was built around. And Carvel ice cream. I went to...
Carvel's.
Yes. Oh. So the important things.
Yes.
I went to Citronia Elementary School, the same one as Iacocca. And anyway, positive memories there. It's beautiful, lots of trees.
Oh, yeah, I've been there
4 seasons like we have here. So it's a nice place.
So growing up, how were you raised, and how were those morals and values instilled into you that made you who you think you are today?
So, at the time when I lived with my parents were Republicans. My dad today is far from that, but I like to tease him. I say that he raised me right, and it stuck. So, absolutely, it's I was taught to be a good citizen, to register to vote, and back in the day, I subscribed to the print newspaper when that was still a thing, and studied the candidates, studied the issues, and was busy being a mom and raising my kids, and I thought I was kind of a basic citizen.
You used to be able to get true information in the paper, I remember.
Before journalism was dead, yes.
Yeah.
There's extreme bias now, and it's who's what is the editor, who's the editor, and what is their angle. Actually, when I first got into politics, it was back when the prison, if you remember the prison, they wanted to relocate it from the point of the mountain, and Saratoga Springs was on that short list, as was Eagle Mountain. I mean, Tooele, West Jordan, I could go on and on. But that's how I actually got involved. I thought I was going to end up going to some type of a cottage meeting, passing out flyers. That's kind of what I envisioned. And it turned into so much more, where I learned to navigate the legislature, organize rallies, write op-eds, be interviewed on radio and television. And that was kind of my journey from Citizen 101. I feel like I have an honorary degree in political science. A lot of my colleagues have the actual piece of paper, but that's, my graduate and undergraduate degrees have nothing to do with politics.
So how did you get into it? Who pushed you? What interested you in running?
Well, I at the time of the announcement of that the former senator was going to resign, I was working for Americans for Prosperity Utah, and so I was already working on things like tax reform, occupational licensing reform, and criminal justice reform. So these were things that I did for fun, right? I was a political hobbyist. So in my spare time, I was a delegate, I was a precinct chair. I helped others run for office. I had a lot of volunteer work, some paid campaign work. I ran for partisan office. I was the secretary of the Utah County Republican Party. And then later, I was appointed to be on, the Good Governance Advisory Board looking at changing the Utah County form of government. And then I was appointed for a 3-year term to be on the Utah County Planning Commission. And so this is what I did for fun. The thing is, once I got involved, I realized how important it was and how much influence we, not just me, have. And once I knew that, I felt like a moral obligation to not look away. I thought, who's going to hold the flashlight if I leave? And so, whether I'm in elected office or not, I've been doing this for so long. It really, the title is just, I don't know, a bonus, I guess. But I won't be a senator forever. I'll always be a citizen. And so, with or without the title, knowing what I know, I can't look away anymore.
I love your attitude. Last podcast we had a gentleman from Ukraine who's a sniper. And when I asked him, because he was here and he was going to be leaving and possibly going back to the front lines, and I asked him, why are you going back? Why don't you go? His family has fled to Germany. And he said, who else will fight I have to fight for my country. Like, I have to. What else would I do? I need to fight for my people. And so he has that same patriotism for his country that we should all have here.
That's awesome.
We had Tammy Flake on here a couple weeks ago, too.
Oh, love Tammy. Another veteran.
Too.
For a U.S. veteran, yes.
Americans for Prosperity as well. So did you guys know each other at Americans for Prosperity?
She was one of our volunteers. And when a position came open, I told her she ought to apply. And she was worried about not having a degree. And I said, actually, the organization has said that, I don't remember the exact percent, but 78% of their positions are now open to anyone without a degree. They practice what they preach, and, I observe this kind of street smarts with my own mother. My mother was busy raising, six kids, and my dad was off getting multiple degrees and in the Navy. And she, when they divorced, she became a single mother, and eventually she became a president and CEO of her own company. And so, I've observed, the traditional route, the brick and mortar route, and I've observed the other one, which is just grit and determination. So that's America.
Right.
Yeah. She does a lot of stuff for Heroes Haven now up in Park City. Do you know much about what Heroes Haven does?
No, not very much. I know that she honestly, she has her hands in so many different pots. She just has a service heart, and she's always helping. I know she's going back to D.C. for veterans things and involved very locally with the Veteran of Foreign Wars and the VFW. She's very involved.
She's a great human.
Yeah, it was a great podcast, and particularly what she was doing for the veterans and trying to help prevent veteran suicide and all that kind of stuff. You were mentioning that you served mission in Japan.
I did.
Still has the language?
Mochiron desu.
I do, yes. Let me get my Duolingo open.
Yes, my husband actually speaks Japanese as well, so it's our secret code language when we don't want the kids to know what we're saying.
I love this. Where did you meet him?
He was actually my missionary training center sensei.
Scandal.
One of 3, but I didn't meet him as John until I'd been home for a year. So 2.5 years later, we met as John and Heidi.
That's so
and
cool.
This month is our 30-year anniversary. So
congrats! You had a lot of
you.
Anniversaries coming up here.
We do. Our 10-year anniversary when we went back to Japan together, since we hadn't been able to do that. So
my
that
boss,
fun.
his son is in, and I don't know what part of Japan he's in, but he's only been out there like 4 months.
Wonderful. I loved it.
How long did it take you to pick up that language?
I was a Spanish major at BYU when I received my call to serve in Japan. And I can tell you that the vowels are the same in Spanish as they are in Japanese. So
there's
a,
that.
I, u, e, o. They're pronounced the same, and that's about it. That's where the similarities end. And they've adopted the word for bread from Spanish. So pan is pan in Japanese and Spanish. So.
Well, that's good. I'm very fluent Spanish, so I can pick that up.
That's great.
I understand that picking up the spoken language is significantly easier than the written, because...
Absolutely. Yes.
Have you picking up the written? Can you write
I can write with furigana, hiragana, katakana, and I can recognize some characters. I still do my Duolingo to stay sharp. My husband majored in Japanese, so he can actually read more than I can, but I use, as women do, we tend to talk more. So
I
my
admire
fluency is better.
anybody that can read that, because it's hieroglyphics to the rest of us. We're like,
Sure, it's pictures. Yeah, I'm still learning. I can't read a Japanese newspaper yet.
So what did your family say when you came and said, "Hey, I'm going to run for Senate"? What did your husband say? What did the kids think?
He was very supportive. As a matter of fact, as sometimes things go, spouse has one hobby and the other spouse has another, and never the twain shall meet. And it's now one of his new hobbies. And I need to pick up one of his, which is golf, because that seems to be a thing with legislators. So I still have a long way to go there, but he's been very supportive. As a matter of fact, the first year that we went to the Capitol for the session, he normally works remotely, only going to his office on Wednesdays, and which is just down from the Capitol, the Triad Center, across from the Delta Center. But during the session, he drove me up the first day, and that was nice and neat. And then, without asking, he drove me to and from work every day during the session, and worked instead of working at home. He worked at the office so that I could have those 2 hours back in my day to read bills, answer emails, put on my makeup sometimes. So he's a wonderful support.
That's a huge support. And I'm assuming the kids got out on the campaign trail with you. How was that?
A little bit.
Did they get out on the street corners
Yeah, we have the the parade, and some more than others.
How old were your kids during the campaign?
So young adults and just in high school, one in high school. So one in high school, and the rest were already graduated.
Oh, okay. So they don't mind honking waves and...
Some of them are more comfortable with it than others. We'll just say that.
Just say that. Didn't like the public attention they get up on stage with you or anything else like that?
They did, they did come for, when at the special election, and they were there. They came for my swearing in, the things that are really important. But, I invite them to lots of things that they choose not to come to, but they've been there for the things that are the most important to me.
Well, that's good to know. As you get into the legislative session, what were some of the first things that you worked on?
So I have actually had a military bill every year that I've been in. So, 2 sessions I've had a military bill, and I actually have one for 2026. But it was important to me to help those who've helped our country. I can't think of anything more important. So one of those bills basically said, if you are, out serving our country and your occupational or business license happens to expire, there's going to be 2 things that we're going to do for you. A, we're going to waive the fee and that penalty, and then we're going to allow, you extra time to renew that upon your return. So we just, we don't need them worrying about that while they're out serving.
Yeah, they definitely don't need to be penalized when they're out serving the country.
Yep.
That's actually good effort. Has that passed, or has that gone up?
That passed. All 3 of my bills, all of my bills that I've run have passed. So I was fortunate within the first 3 weeks of my very first session, I passed all of my bills.
Certainly there was no pushback on that one.
No. Typically the military bill one seems to go well. The one that I had this session was kind of the first of its kind in the nation. The Department of Defense is looking at this to say, we want to push this down as model legislation to the other states. And it basically said, if you are in the Utah retirement system and you are a military member who is called upon to have a change of station or to move outside of the state, before 4 years' time, which is when your 401k portion of your benefits would be vested. It's different if you and I, are tired of the cold and we want to move to Florida or somewhere, or Arizona, somewhere warmer, versus someone who is called upon by their country and their state to move. And so now, not only will our military members be allowed to vest at any point with with proof of their moving orders. But they will also, if their spouse is in the Utah retirement system, so often they'll marry other military members or teachers or people who are in the public retirement system, the Utah retirement system or URS. And it also applies for them because unless you're getting divorced, families are moving together. And so, again, we didn't want to penalize those who, through no choice of their own, are being asked to move.
And these are things the rest of us who aren't in the military system don't even think about. We don't think about all the little roadblocks that they hit.
Yeah. And
when they're
then
serving.
for 2026, I have a bill that it's called the military crosswalk. I had talked about running it my very first session, and they said, we're not quite ready for that yet. And now they're ready, and it's in drafting phases. But a military crosswalk is basically translating the codes for the jobs that our veterans are doing in the military to civilian occupations or licenses so that they're not spending redundant time and money when they go. Some states have tackled this, little chunks at a time. Especially it's very common to have, a certificate that translates for the medical field, right? And that's easier. But what about everyone else? Do their skills not matter? Absolutely not. So this says we're going to take everything, we're going to give rulemaking authority to DOPL or Department of Professional Licensing and allow them to create codes that will help them translate. And back to the suicide thing that you mentioned, part of suicide prevention is financial stress. As a matter of fact, I actually talked to Tammy, it was a week or two ago, the number one stressor for veterans is financial. I mean, I just tend to think of PTSD, and obviously that's a thing too. But statistically, the number one stress in their life is financial. And if we can help them get a job, then hopefully we can prevent more suicides.
I can't tell you how important that one is because that actually hits home because I have all 4 of my kids in the military.
Which branches?
So I have, my oldest was Army, then he got kicked out because of COVID because he wouldn't take the jab.
Good for him.
But now he's going back in National Guard full-time. My second son just got out of the Air Force, and he's the one that's having that problem. Mm-hmm. So he was a C-130 mechanic for 7 years. There's nothing about a plane he doesn't know. He was in charge of 5 wings down in Texas. Yeah. Not a single C-130 could leave the ground without his signature on it. I mean, that's how in charge he was. Mm-hmm. He gets up here and trying to find a job, and none of that translates. He has to go out and pay for all these certificates so he can work on a commercial airliner. Yeah. And there is nothing he doesn't know about a plane already.
Yeah, that's exactly the problem we're trying to address.
He's been back for 2 months, and he still can't find a job because no one will hire him. Because all he has is military experience. That's all he has. And, I mean, I've been trying to help him find a job, but
it's a travesty.
He put in 7 years, and he can't get anything right now. Because all he knows is how
this bill will address that, and it'll give them rulemaking authority, which normally is not something you want to give to an organization, but in this case you do because you want them to allow them to figure out for all these job codes what it can translate into to get them to those civilian jobs sooner.
Yeah, and the problem with those certificates is no one gives those certificates in Utah, not for the C-130. So you'd have to travel outside the state to get the certificate. And the cost of it is almost $10,000. It's an insane amount. Yeah. And he says, I could go and take the test right now and just not even go through the classwork and just pass it, and they won't even let him do that.
Would that be some sort of criteria DOPL would do?
So yes, we're looking at it's still right in the drafting stages. But yeah, some of the things that we want, the guardrails we want to put in there is like, how many years removed are you from your service, right? If you served 30 years ago, might be time to get some refresher things, or you know what I mean. So we're looking at those kinds of things right now. We're working on those tweaks.
He's 2 months out.
But I work for a university that is competency-based learning. So, for example, I have a son who, in 2 months' time, got 43 credit hours. I have a daughter who completed a master's in 13 months because you're not restrained by seat time or, in a classroom, right? Or by semesters. If you are a go-getter and if you have time, if you can prove that you take the test, you can prove that you know the stuff, you can save yourself time and money. So I'm absolutely a fan of the competency-based education.
That'd be great. And yeah, then my last
Or
two
vocations.
sons are actually in their AIT training right now in Virginia. They just got out of boot camp and they're going to be Black Hawk helicopter mechanics. So
Cool.
yeah, they're all in there. And then my daughter's up at Utah State and she's a pilot. So
Friends of the family, I guess.
friends of the family. You're proposing that this coming session in January, I'm assuming, and so you think that would probably pass this coming year?
I've got a general sponsoring it. We've got two-star generals in the House, and they've been great supporters of these bills. I usually have one of them be the floor sponsor for these bills, and it helps.
It has to go through DOPL?
Yeah,
the
it will.
Office
Yes.
of Occupational Licensing.
Yeah.
I just sometimes have issues with DOPL.
Well, most government agencies people have problems with. So that's fair.
Well, that's going to actually probably help a lot of them because, like Tammy was saying, the vast majority of them get out and nothing they've done translates straight across, and then they all struggle just paying bills.
It's that translation that we
And
need.
then all they know is military. And we were talking before that when you go from high school straight into military and then you're trying to transition to public life, that transition is significantly different than transitioning from college to public life. And the vast majority of the public are like, well, why don't they just transition? It's just when you walk into military, it is just so regimented. I mean, you wake up a certain time, you have to be at the morning flag ceremony at a certain time, you have to be at PT a certain time, and everything's just regulated all day long. And you are given orders and you obey those orders, and all of a sudden you're going into an environment where that's just not there anymore.
Right.
And you just kind of get lost. You're like, I don't even know what to do with myself anymore. Mm-hmm. And the longer you've been in, the harder it is to transition, particularly if you are infantry or anything like that, that all you know is banging doors and front lines and carrying a gun. And that's even harder to transition. And that alone is a struggle. And then you add to that any type of actual action where they've lost people or they've had injuries, and you just compound the problem. So anything we can do as a people to help that transition is going to be huge for these veterans. And that's just where they struggle.
Yeah, so this year I went to ALEC in Indianapolis, American Legislative Executive Council, which is a conservative organization, and they have model policy, and you have meetings, and you're allowed to be on 2 committees. So this year, for the first time, they had a Veterans and Military Affairs Caucus, so I joined that one on as well as education. So I was excited to share what I was doing and to learn what other states are doing. So we've got to share our best practices, and then modify things so that they're Utah-esque.
What brought you to that, to have stuff for veterans, like your very, very first bills?
I'm trying to remember, honestly. I'm always open to good ideas. I certainly don't have a monopoly on all of them. All the good ideas are out there, come from your constituents. They come from think tanks. They come from military members. And, they're great ideas come from anywhere. So just being open to the universe, things will come to you.
I applaud that, because there's very, very few legislators that the first thing they're doing is thinking about the veterans, and so that's huge. And then the second thing you're thinking about is education, and you just jumped right into the whole education debate.
Yes. So I actually, so when I came in the first year, I was put automatically into the former senator's committee assignments, which makes sense because you're in the middle of things. It's like dominoes. You move one and a bunch of others fall, and you got to move everyone else around. So I had some pretty big assignments right from the get-go. They made me the Senate chair of Social Services Appropriations, which is the largest part of our state budget. And then this year, every 2 years there are leadership elections. Leadership decides which committee assignments you're going to get. As a former educator, I definitely wanted to be involved in education. Having a young district, that's also another important reason, is because so many are affected by what is done there. So this year I am the chair the second most expensive part of our budget. It's like 8.4 and 8.3 billion. So they're right there neck and neck. And I'm chair of public education appropriations, K through 12 funding. And then I'm also on the education standing committee. So I've got the policy side and the funding side, which obviously both are important. And as you may know, when I worked with Americans for Prosperity Utah, school choice was one of the things we pushed for. And the first year before I ever became a legislator, we tried and failed. But there's something to say for persistence, because here we are with school choice, codified, and then the second year, expanded, and of course, there's the whole issue with the district courts and an appeal, but
how would you explain to somebody who doesn't know? When I was a young mother, I'm in my 30s, and I'm helping out with the PTA, and we're meeting with school districts and the superintendent, and they're telling us vouchers are bad. This is how they kill. You're only getting one side of the story. So the way they explain it is they say, so let's say the fire department, you don't use their services. When you have a fire, you use the hose down at the end of the street. You take care of your own fire. So you don't want to pay into the fire department. Then the funding goes down and the fire department doesn't have enough money to operate. They said, it's the same thing. Vouchers are going to work that way. That's how they indoctrinated me as a young mom. They're like, so you as a parent have to help this PTA fight for the schools and not allow monies to leave public schools, because then there's not enough money to run it. So, and these were good people that I trusted, and I thought I was conservative at the time. And how do you explain that better to moms who are in the system? And I have friends who work in the education system, and they just think any funding coming out of there is just wrong. And
there's a lot of misinformation. There are a lot of myths. And, the best thing, right, when you're referring people, is to go to the source documents. So some of the things that I like to share is I'd like to share from, especially, it's interesting that I didn't expect to find resistance from my Republican colleagues or friends who are Republicans. I thought we shouldn't find any resistance in this quarter. Why?
Agreed.
Because not in our state constitution. So in the Republican, I'll just read it to you. So first of all, there's three places that I like to refer them to. So I like to refer them to our state constitution, our U.S. Constitution, and then to the Republican Platform Party, the National Republican Platform, and then the state Republican Platform. And so I read it to them there, and they're like, what? That's in there, right? Because it's so big, right? It's so big, or how often do you reference these things? So if you don't mind, I'll just share it with you.
Yeah,
but
go ahead.
Let's just start with our state code in Utah. And it says, it's clear, and it says, under both the United States Constitution and the Constitution of the state, a parent possesses a fundamental liberty interest in the care, custody, and management of the parent's children. A fundamentally fair process must be provided to parents if the state moves to challenge or interfere with parental rights. A government entity must support any actions or allegations made in opposition to the rights and desires of a parent regarding the parent's children by sufficient evidence to satisfy a parent's constitutional entitlement to heightened protection against government interference with the parent's fundamental rights and liberty interest, and concomitantly the right of the child to be reared by the child's natural parents. Okay? And then basically the way that I see it is we're moving the parents back into the driver's seat, right? Instead of administrators. Let's go to the national GOP Republican platform. On page 34, it states, choice in education. We support options for learning, including homeschooling, career and technical education, private or parochial schools, magnet schools, charter schools, online learning, and early college high schools. We especially support the innovative financing mechanisms that make options available to all children. Education savings account, which is what Utah has. It has been there's a misnomer. They call it a voucher. It is we have an ESA, or an educational savings account. They like to use the word voucher because voucher has a negative connotation. Fair or not, it does. There's a stigma attached. Vouchers and tuition tax credits. Now, if I had it my way, we would be doing this on a tax credit, but we're not there yet. So I would just say helping people to understand it from a conservative perspective, empowering families, and not just conservative, but from a universal truth perspective, empowering families to access these learning environments that's going to best help their children. And whether you have 1 children, 3, 6, however many children you have, we know that they're each different and their needs are different. But this, I would say, speaking to my colleagues on the left, this is a civil rights challenge of our time. So frame it in their narrative. A young person's ability to succeed in school must be based on their God-given rights and talents and motivation. It shouldn't be based on their zip code, right? Or their economic status. So, right, think about the federal money that comes through Title I for low-income children, through IDA for children with special needs. The money should follow the child wherever the family thinks it would be best for them. We sometimes know or think about this as backpack funding. The money should follow the child, not the school, not the administrator, not the parent, right? It goes to the education that they choose. Here's our Utah GOP platform. That was a national. Under the subheading education, it says, we believe that all children should have access to quality education. Parents have the primary right and responsibility to educate their children, and we support their right to choose public, private, or home education. We support incentives to promote competitive excellence. We encourage cooperative initiatives to help all Utahns become literate in English. We support the prudent and profitable use of school trust lands. We support all interests and dividends from the permanent state school fund being distributed to each public and charter school to improve student academic performance. So, there's this fear that if we have school choice, everyone's going to leave public ed. Well, let's just look to Arizona, right? Arizona now has universal school choice, right? They started small, expanded till now they have any parent can choose where their child is educated. I think they're up to, don't quote me, but I think it's 7 or 8% of the population, or maybe even it's 10%. But either way, right? People are worried about these mass exoduses. And, if that's the case, then I think, like anywhere else, competition makes things thrive. If there's a competition where public ed has had a monopoly for far too long, and so this makes public schools better. So they should encourage it because it's only going to help public ed if they want to retain students. In Utah, this came out in an article this year, so in January of 2025. So these are our statistics. So only 5% of children are homeschooled in the state of Utah. You want to know what the national average is? 6%. So
No
we're
kidding.
We
surprised.
are less than the national average. But the perception, if you're listening to sound bites and media, is that everyone's homeschooling and we have more and it's not good for kids. These are the stats. Here's the other thing that's interesting. How many students do we have in private schools? 3%. Do you want to know what the national average is of kids in private schools? 10%. So, fact versus fiction. Know the facts, and I don't think that you have nothing to fear if you from competition if you're doing your job, and we ought to be constantly looking for ways to improve and innovate.
Well, what I started after doing that, and I'm attending National PTA Convention, and we're fighting for and against vouchers. I started watching because every year, of course, we want more money for education. We want more money for. If you don't raise taxes, you hate teachers. If you don't agree with raising you must hate teachers. So I started watching it as a young mom. Oh, yay, we won. We raised taxes. And then you watch, and it never went to the teachers. Somehow it always went somewhere else. So after a while, I think, how much more are you going to tax us? There have been, in the past years, finally some getting to the teachers. But I was watching the amount of taxes we have raised has never gone for what they promised. But I've seen it go to the unions.
I think there's a concerted effort right now to take more and more control from the parents, and anything that gives that back to the parents, because the government has no right, none, to take any authority of the child. It is not a community child. It is not everybody's child. It is the parent's child. And we had Stephanie Grecius on
Long time ago.
about a month or so ago, and we actually went line by line with the Oregon's Department of Education. Just
My brother lives in Oregon, so
exactly what
I'm
they're
sorry.
doing. And they're taking everything from the parents, so the parents just have no rights with their own kids. And first and foremost, I'd move out of Oregon if I was a parent up there. And second, I'd be definitely homeschooling because the public school system is not getting anywhere near my child up there. But they're purposely trying to indoctrinate the next generation. There's a lot of concerted effort on the left to phase out conservatism. And the only way they do that is by indoctrinating the next generation and somehow putting a stop to those morals and values that we teach as conservatives from getting to the next generation. They're already doing it very, very successfully at the universities, where we have ultra-conservative kids that go into the university and they come out complete 180 and just liberal is all liberal. And that is now filtering down to our high schools and our elementary schools, to where you've got public educators, teachers, administrative staff that are literally coming right out and publicly saying, I know better than the parents. We know better than the parents. We know what's best for the kids. The parents are not educated. They haven't gone through years of study. They haven't gone through all this liberal education. So because I'm educated and the parents are not, we know better, and we're going to take it from here. We're going to take control.
Yeah, there was an incident in Lehigh where someone filmed the teacher, and the teacher no longer works there. But when I grew up, I don't know about you, but I didn't know what political affiliation my teachers were, and that's the way it should be, right? I just didn't know. And here's the thing about freedom, right? Freedom's messy, and people are afraid that there's going to be parents that don't do a good job. Well, there are teachers that don't do a good job. There are school districts that don't do a good job. There are administrators who don't do a good job. There are trade-offs to every choice you have, but freedom should not be tampered with. And, we've seen some of the salaries, these $400,000 salaries of our administrators, and layers, where, again, the funding is not getting to the student where we want it to. But I think of the Ronald Reagan quote. He said, as government expands, liberty contracts. And so, it's much easier when students are involved, like you were talking about your service on the PTA. I was a room mom for my kids. And the more that parents are involved, the students actually thrive. There's data to support that. So trying to remove the parents is going to you're going to have less success and less support in the schools. You've heard of these different programs where the dads come in and act as they're just dads, right? And they're walking around campus, and people behave differently when parents, when they're, the community dads are walking around. And
that is such a great video. I love that video where they're literally the hall monitors. They're the school security.
The welcome committee. I mean, we should want more of parents in school, not less. And the data and the evidence points to that. So why there's this continual push to remove them does not make any sense to me.
Where do people even think that they have the right to take that from the parents in the first place? Just the thought that I can replace them, I can take them out of this, just boggles my mind. How
it's
that
the
thought
frog
process
and
gets
the frog
started.
in the water, right? You don't know that you're there until you're there, and here we are.
You lose perspective, because being so active as a volunteer in the school system, I became like the long-term sub for many of the teachers. And I was in elementary school with my children pretty much through the whole get-go. And you let that one or two bad parents who come in that you are, your heart's for the child, because you're like, oh my gosh, this is what they're going through with this, parent who's got whatever their flaw is, and you attribute it to everybody. So you sit in your own little environment bubble, and you talk to each other, and you rally each other up, and all you see is what we saw in the school. And
we see school take on
lose your
more
perspective
and more responsibility, and I know that it's stressful for our stakeholders in the school, they all of a sudden they became doctors and mental therapists, and and then there's welfare services, and they've taken on more and more responsibility instead of getting back to the basics. And my husband I grew up in the suburbs, and in San Jose I was the minority, right? Very diverse nature, but especially in these smaller towns, the way that it used to be is we took care of each other. We didn't relegate our duties.
Right.
The community took care of one another. And so, and that's, that's not only communities of faith, but people they knew each other, they looked out for each other, and they weren't isolated and they weren't self-focused. People, I guess, don't trust that if the state doesn't do it, it will get done. It got done before we had the Department of Education in the 1970s. We turned out great individuals, including my parents, right? We did things just fine with less intervention from the federal government. We did better when we had more community involvement, and now we're getting away from that and giving the state far too many duties.
Well, I see a lot where schools and unions especially try to put them like a wall around themselves, where they don't want the public input. They don't want people telling them what to do. We're going to do it our way, or it's the highway, right? You guys don't know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And you get ultra powerful unions that are just way too powerful, where you can't get rid of the teachers. And then you get school districts that just get absolutely stuck in their ways. It's like the deep state in government, right? You get these administrative staff that have been doing it their way for the last 30 years, and they're not going to change. And asking them to change the slightest little thing is like hitting a massive, massive roadblock. But I think the correct thing about this is what you were saying. You got to introduce competition, because only when they feel like they have to answer to the public, they have to answer to the parents, that the parents are the absolute boss. And not only that, but if they don't like what they're doing, they can go someplace else. Just like if I was going to a restaurant and I didn't like the service there, I'd go to another one. That mm-hmm. Allowing that competition where only the best teachers in the best school districts survive, well, I think that improved the system to where...
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's interesting because within the public schools, you have district schools and charter schools under this umbrella. And it's interesting because we have charter schools that kind of get treated as the redheaded stepchild, which is interesting because charter schools can be revoked. If they don't do well, they're shuttering. And this,
And the public doesn't know that, because I have parents that say they're unregulated. They just do whatever. They don't even get watched.
Oh, no, they're more regulated, which for here, and this is the double standard.
And parents are mandated to put in time in a charter school.
The double standard is what kills me because, right, if they don't do well, then they're shuttered. But what happens with our district schools when they don't do well? They throw more money at them.
Yeah, and money.
Tell me how that makes sense. So
money doesn't solve the problem.
Not always, and it's one tool, and it's an important tool, but again, there shouldn't be a double standard in public ed, and they don't have enough funding to a lot of these bigger schools, the district schools have full-time individuals that are paid a full-time salary just for compliance, and they might have multiple individuals. Where a charter school, it might be the principal doing that duty, wearing multiple hats, and they don't have cafeterias and they don't have transportation funding, and yet they get by. Again, so kind of this, I guess, disparate treatment is something that I'm working on.
My wife's an educator. She's been a teacher for nearly 20 years now.
Wonderful.
And together we've seen it all, because she started out in the Head Start program down in the Provo School District.
Oh, you've really seen it all, yeah.
And the messed up program that is, because it's doing some good, but then it depends on who's doing it to actually,
Sure.
if they actually serve the minorities and actually help them get that leg up. Then she went from there to private school, and she got Montessori school certified, and she saw the Montessori program.
Montessori.
And just Montessori is light years ahead of the public school system. It is insanely good education, and the kids advanced so quickly. And then she went from there to Davis School District and taught Davis School District for a while, and now she's teaching at a charter school. And my son goes to the same charter school, and charter school is light years ahead of the public school system. And so having that choice, parents can decide, okay, am I going to go public? Am I going to go charter? Am I going to go private? Does my kid need additional assistance like a Head Start program? And so someone can't argue with me or with my wife, in fact, as to the difference between the programs, because we've been there, done that for
20 years.
20 years. So we know what every single program has to offer. And parents have got to have that choice and says, you don't understand my child. I understand my child. I know his learning abilities or disabilities. I know what works and what doesn't work. And I've got to fit the program to my child, because some kids work really well with a high test environment, and some other kids that do really well in school know everything and just absolutely freeze when it comes to tests.
Sure.
And so, and the parents know and understand that. And you can't have educators that are like, I know better than you, I know more than you, I'm going to make the decisions, not you. And so having the school choice program where the money follows the child and giving the parents the power to make those decisions, we're just going to have a higher educated population and a more successful population. Because parents are going to do what's in the best interest of their kid. And we're a free country, and they should have that freedom.
Absolutely.
In what ways would we see improvement if we finally get education back in the hands of the state? What would change?
Oh, from the Department of Education.
Federal.
Yeah, I know they've talked about cuts of up to 50%. Here's the thing. If you support federalism, which I do, then you should absolutely support the moving of education back to the states where it belongs. So I looked at the statistic for how much of our funding for K through 12 comes from the federal government, and I think it was, here it is right here. So this is according to the Kem Gardner report. Utah's 2026 fiscal year state budget includes about $600 million in federal funds for public education. And so for perspective, that number represents 7% of our total education budget. Other states are much higher. But really what happens with the federal funding is there's strings attached. Some of the cuts that I've heard proposed, some people are afraid that money is going away completely. Well, that's not the whole truth, but it's good for fear mongering and scary things like that. There have been some austerity measures for sure, but what it does is they have the opportunity to send when they get rid of all these layers of staff, that frees up money, right? So put it towards our debt, or reallocate it somewhere else. But what it will do is allow them to send block grants down to the state. Well, what's great about a block grant is that there aren't the strings that tell you have to follow this program, this dogma ideology, in order to receive the funding. So, a gift without strings attached, that sounds like a better idea to me. We actually did something in the state of Utah this year that kind of mirrors somewhat of what is happening at the federal level, and that is the Speaker of the House, Mike Schultz, said, we want our publicly funded universities to take a look and trim 10%, and people lost their ever-loving minds, right? But here's the thing. I've been talking with some of I'm going to out any certain ones, been talking with some of these administrators, and it allowed them to do something. It allowed them to get rid of programs that were not necessarily working, or they were less utilized. It allowed them to restructure, gave them permission where it may not have been popular to do the things that maybe they wanted to do anyway. And, and especially, right, you get into the status quo, what's comfortable, and it really made them prioritize and focus on what was needed. So it was a good exercise in the end. I mean, it was hard, especially the ones that received the most funding, like the ones that have been around the longest, like let's say the U of U, versus a newer one, the newer ones. But a good exercise to have to go through, because in the free market, in the private sector, right, you're going through RIFs or reductions in force. You're going through hiring freezes, freezing R&D in a bad year, a lean year. And then in the good years, you're investing in R&D, you're hiring more people. And these things, you're responsive to the actual market needs. And when you have a monopoly on something and you're it, and the money keeps coming no matter what the economy's doing, that's not reflective of the market, and it puts us in a bad spot in our budget. So, I think they proposed 15% funding cuts, and that doesn't mean so. What we did in Utah is something they could do at the federal level, which is to say, okay, this is 10%, but if you come back to the state with a plan and you say we need X and X, we have the option to fund you for that if you can prove that if it's worth its salt. So, that's healthy. Healthy companies are constantly looking for ways to be leaner, to innovate, to shed things that aren't working. But if you're not forced to, then you become less competitive. You became less flexible and responsive to market needs, to the jobs that matter. And we've kind of seen this on a microcosm, on the state level here in Utah. And so, is it scary? We're already there. And so, that was 10%. This is 15%. So, is it scary? Yes, but actually, it should be less scary for us because we've already seen what it looks like. It's not as big of a deal as I make it out. Is it going to be hard? Absolutely. Are hard things make us better? I think so, and I think that we can do better, and we have to do this in our own homes, where we change our budgets according to our means. And this exercise is frankly out of practice, right? They haven't done it for a long time. And I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. And I think that we're going to come out okay, just like we did in Utah. The states are going to find out that they're going to live okay. And honestly, the more or the less independent or the less dependent we are on the federal government, the more solvent, the better we are off. When I feel like anytime we would take checks from the government anyway, that's trillions of dollars in debt. So it's like funny money. So the more we can do with our own state funding, the better. And 7% of the budget on education. I know that everyone likes money and to be able to fund more things, but the less money that we are relying upon the federal government, the better, in my opinion.
Well, the federal government should take that into consideration. I mean, I know DOJ is trying to do what they can, but the federal government puts all these programs together, and then they just sit on the books. And they get funded year after year after year, even though the program's long expired, somebody's still mysteriously just still getting money. And so all these cutbacks, it's got to be overhauled completely on the federal level. But the state's got to do that too, because you will get all these programs that just fall by the wayside, and
we have other states. Yeah, we have other states who are a drain on the system, and there's no check, right? And when you have states like us who have, we've tightened our belts and we're being fiscally responsible, and then you've got places like California and New York with no restraint. We are subsidizing their gluttony, and that's not right. And so, putting everyone on the same level, this has got to end. No more, right? Why should taxpayers have to subsidize this out of control spending that they allow to happen in other states? So this, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I like how you guys do it
too, because the legislature can be the bad guy, right? So you can tell a university, I need you to cut, and so now you got a university president that can say, hey, it's not my fault, and he doesn't have to come out and be the bad guy, but he can do things.
It gives them cover to do the hard thing.
Wanted to do a lot
Trust me, we're used to being targets. We don't love it, but sometimes that's the job.
So sometimes that's the job. And I like what they're doing with the Department of Education in eliminating that, because the strings have got to stop. I mean, you look back at the Obama administration, and they required the whole LGBTQ thing, or else you're not getting federal funding. Mm-hmm. And then you look at the Biden administration and some of the Trump administration, where the Department of Education was under control, where our own governor, in order to get that money, had the mask mandate for all the schools. And he just put that out there, even though everybody knew it wasn't doing anything. COVID was actually ending. We were on the final stages of it. Everybody's taking their masks off anyway, and he still prolonged the mask mandate in schools because he wanted the federal funding.
Yeah, thank heavens I'm from Utah County, where our sheriff said I'm not going to enforce it. I'll just say that. It matters where you live.
Well, it just goes to show how many strings come from federal funds. And I think that's one of the main things why the left is fighting not letting this happen, because they don't want to lose those strings. They want to indoctrinate the next generation. They want to have control, because everything on their side is all about control.
It could be. Wow.
And they want those strings attached. So you have this article here to where Department of Education, in essence, are trying to eliminate it. And so the order came down, what's the date on this, back in March 11th, to where they're going to be laying off over half the Department of Education, because the Supreme Court said they were allowed to do that, because that was even fought in the courts. Trying to stop that from even that 50% reduction, and then the court said they can do that. So now they're literally going out there and just reducing everything. I love this comment here. I want to close up the Department of Education, move education back to the state, said Trump. That's where it should have been in the first place. I don't know why they even put the deal of the Department of Education. And like you were saying, we're subsidizing these other states. And he says, yeah, it's probably going to be a problem for California. They're probably going to struggle.
It's time to pay the piper.
It's time to pay the piper, because they probably are going to struggle.
Well, here's another thing that we haven't talked about that is tied to this. You may have noticed, I mean, my area is the fastest growing area in the state, my Senate district. And so, you know, we're seeing enrollment numbers rise. However, as a whole, and that there's a whole nother issue attached with this, but we're just going to talk about it in terms of schooling. There's a report from the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute that talks about we've seen a decrease in enrollment, with the most significant drops in our younger grades or elementary grades. And that's according to the Utah State Board of Education. But then the Kempsey Gardner policy suggests that this downward trend is going to continue for the next 10 years. And what is this caused by? Declining fertility rates and demographic shifts. So fewer people are getting married, they're having fewer kids. And so it's hard to justify the same numbers. Again, in my area where we are growing, right, we might need more of the money, but then there's a, you know, whole socializing where the spending goes. Everyone gets the same, even if you have more students and you have less, and that needs to stop. But let's think about the U.S. Constitution, Article 10. Guess what, folks? If you read it, you know what you're not going to find there? What is the job of the federal government and those enumerated powers? Education is not one of them. You know, this is not hard to find. You just go to that Article 10 and you'll see that our Constitution doesn't specifically grant the federal government the power to control or fund public education directly. So even if people are upset, if we were doing something that was unconstitutional, it's time to stop. Education is primarily a state and local responsibility according to the 10th Amendment. And the 10th Amendment reserves the powers not delegated to the federal government, to the states or the people. And that is reflected in the fact that state and local governments provide the vast majority of funding for K through 12. Like I said, we're only getting 7%. And the federal government has no enumerated power to dictate how our states explore or implement emerging technologies, or how we craft our education and what that looks like. We have to be free to lead. We have to be free to innovate and govern in ways that reflect our state, our unique values, and our unique people. And that is the promise of federalism.
You know, the hard left is rallying up the less educated citizens, and they think that by shutting down the Department of Education, that means like schools are, there's no education anymore. There's no schools. It's all relegated to the parents now. I'm hearing comments of, so what, we're all supposed to stay home and educate our kids now? Like they don't know anything about facts.
Change is scary.
Especially when you don't understand everything in the first place and all you're thinking of is just wild imagination. Mm-hmm. They don't understand that just because the Department of Education closes down, the money doesn't close down. The money just gets shifted over to other departments, and then the states still get the same amount of money. Just this time, they just get a check with no paperwork attached.
Right.
and it's just handled by another department. And
Sounds
that's it.
great
That's a
to
clean
me.
way to put it.
Sounds good to me.
Here's a wire of the money, your $600 million or $600 billion, whatever it is you get a year, but no paperwork involved. You just get it, and then you guys get to decide what you do with the money, and that's how it should be. That's how it always should have been. And as we know with the federal government, year after year after year, they just pull in more and more power, more and more control. They get bigger, they get more bloated. And at some point, we got to rein them in, and that's what Trump's been doing is trying to rein in everything. It's not just Department of Education, but he's reining in USAID, he's reining in the Defense Department, he's reining in the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, which was heavily bloated too. In our own state, we have like we're just discussing the choice program. And right now, like you mentioned, it is going through the court systems, and you have a judge that has ruled that it is unconstitutional, that the law is unconstitutional, but that she is not going to stop it because she knows that it's just going to get appealed. So the law is still in effect, even though she's judged it unconstitutional, and it's currently waiting for the Supreme Court to pick it up.
Yes.
Where do you know, where's that sitting at? Where are we at with that?
You know, what's so ironic about this whole thing is that, so on April 18, 2025, Judge Laura Scott ruled the program unconstitutional, finding, this is her finding, it is not, quote, open to all children as required by Article 10. Well, okay, so that is an excellent case for universal school choice. So the very argument that they're using to say it's unconstitutional is the very reason I believe that we should have universal school choice. So I just thought that was kind of funny.
I don't understand the thought process. What is not open? Because a parent is at home.
Funding, right? Access, funding and access.
The same argument you were making before is they think that the funding is going to get pulled from the schools, and the schools are going to essentially go out of business, right?
Yeah.
Which some schools might. And if they are that poorly managed and run and the parents don't trust the schools, then they probably should go out of business, and the other schools should pick up that slack.
Yeah.
But that's the choice of the parents, not the choice of
So
school
when
districts
do
or
we think this
union.
will get addressed?
I'm not sure when the state Supreme Court is going to hear the case, but we do know. What we do know is, despite the ruling, the injunction, no injunction was imposed, which means that anyone, families, can proceed with the plans they had, that the state had to distribute the scholarships for the 25,
But at half the
26
funding.
years. Well, that was a legislature. That wasn't the courts that made that determination. That was changes that made in an attempt to expand the program. They thought, well, if we give less money to each student, then there'll be more money to fund more students. That's kind of the overall principle of
So is that
the expansion.
that sounds like it's more of a permanent change then.
That one was, yeah.
So it is going to be just half the funding from now on
For homeschoolers.
for homeschoolers. And so the parents of those homeschoolers are just going to have to re-budget
Correct.
their homeschooling program.
Correct. If I had it my way, I would prefer that everyone got the same amount, regardless of whether it was private school or homeschool or any other option. That is not what was passed, and we don't always get what we want, but that's where we're
We've
at.
discussed that many times before. You've got
Yeah.
a lot of legislators up there, and everybody's got to come to agreement, and you're never ever going to get everything you want.
Correct.
And you can't kill the bill either just because you're not getting everything you want. You got to take that base hit. You got to take that.
Right. We want to move another
move
sports
the
analogy,
needle.
move the football down the yard line. It's not always a touchdown.
Yeah, we literally just had that in the Burgess Owens.
Yeah. I mean,
He's
he had
so
a lot
cute.
of football analogies.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
He just said, yeah, you got to take that base hit. You got to take that 10-yard pass and just take what you can get and keep the ball moving, because the other side's not going to stop from trying to move the ball our direction either. So
That's
you gotta-
right. That's right.
You got to get what you can and move on with it, no matter how painful it is to have to rebudget that.
Yep.
So let's get into some fun topics that are interesting, current events, current news, what's going on out there. and this may tie in a little bit in with this. So you've got a lot going on with immigration right now.
Yes.
A ton going on with immigration right now. And some of that is what's going on in California. So California's got like a max exodus of people just moving out of the state, but they've also got a mass influx of illegal immigrants going into the state. So that's going to completely change their demographic and their school system, because all those kids are going to be in the school system and all that kind of stuff. But there's a new potential law that's being proposed by a congresswoman down in Miami called the Dignity Act. We're going to pull that up here. Dignity Act essentially kind of goes through and allows anybody that's been here before December 31st of 2020 to essentially apply for what in essence is going to be a work visa. They'll have a 7-year legal status, work authorization. They'll have to pay $1,000 a year for 7 years plus 1% of their paycheck, whatever that is, as a penalty. But then they don't have to look over their shoulder that ICE is going to come pick them up. Some of the add-ons to this thing, though, is what I really kind of want to discuss and see just your basic opinion. I mean, doesn't matter here.
You
or there,
and your
basic opinion.
cohorts obviously are talking about this, right? Like, have you guys talked about what that would look like for Utah, or what you do or don't like in the bill?
Yeah, I think like most things, there are pluses and minuses. I actually went down to the border in the spring and late spring of 2023 with Americans for Prosperity. We took a camera crew, and the organization was falsely accused of wanting open borders, and so they thought, let's just show what we actually believe. And we met with Border Patrol agents, we met with private property owners on the Rio Grande, and we met with Catholic Charities. So we kind of the full spectrum, where I talked to people from China, I talked to people from Venezuela, who had come at the Catholic Charities. Anyway, it was a eye-opening experience, and of course, this was all before. I mean, we've had a problem for a very, very long time, but there is federal legislation that has been proposed but never passed that has some of these good ideas. One of them is called the Border Visibility and Security Act, and it would create this 700-mile border road. It would clear the area near the border of the two main types of vegetation that people hide in. So talking to the Border Patrol agents, right, they're not interested in one contiguous wall. That's not cost effective or what's needed. They're like, we need it in these key strategic areas because this is where most people are coming through. And we need to remove this vegetation, which is where they hide in. The two plants that are a threat is creosote and salt cedar, anyway, if you're curious. But they obstruct the views and give cover for illegal activities. The other thing that was very interesting is, the other side of the border on the Mexico side is very organized. They have what they call sentinels every mile on their side. And it's not to protect the people who are trying to come through. It's to make sure that they pay. And there are different price points depending on where you're coming from. If you're coming from China, you pay $20,000. If you're getting dropped off 5 miles before the border, 3 miles, 1 mile, or across the other side, they have different price points. So, I mean, and it's such a profitable business. If this Dignity Act passes, I think, right, this industry shuts down, which is why it hasn't, I believe, which is why we haven't passed anything, is because too many people stand to profit, and that makes me just ill. Another one is we talked to these Border Patrol agents who are about to retire. Right, they've been in 25 years. They're set to retire. And when back in 2023, when I went, there was already a 3,000. They were 3,000 employees shy, so they didn't have enough help. So so what does the other side do? They make a little diversion over here, and then everyone cuts through here because they can't be, the amount of employees. There's all kinds of tactics that they use, but there's a Border Patrol Enhancement Act, which would help fund the agents who decided to stay, right, and to continue working. It's a good salary. I don't know if it's I can't remember the number, if it's between $50,000 or $60,000 without a degree. It's a good paying salary, but these people are having to change into civilian clothes before they go home because they often get followed. I mean, there's all kinds of risks and things, but There is another one, which is last in, first out policy. It's called the Bipartisan Border Solutions Act. And there's some things that we did a long time ago that worked that we can reinstate, which I see in part of this, the Dignity Act. But one of those was back in the late, when was it? There was a program called the Bracero program. Bracero coming from the word brasso, right? The manual laborers. So the Bracero program, when they instituted it, they went from having just from one country, just from Mexico, the illegal immigration, when they instituted the Bracero program for migrant workers to come over, work the fields, and then return home without penalty, reduced by 95%, just by making certain things legal. And I see that in part of this this act. It's not quite the Bracero program, but they have
they have a 60-day
the 60-day asylum.
And they also have a 90-day where they can go across the border for 90 days and then come back. Question I have for you: this is supposed to extend the DREAM Act. This is supposed to completely extend the DREAM Act, and I don't know. I don't know every single particular behind the DREAM Act. But the one thing I do like about this is zero path to citizenship. Because my biggest concern is Democrats want voters, and that's the whole reason, the only reason why the border was ever opened up is they want as many illegals in here as possible because they're essentially importing voters, and they're just going to push for either passive citizenship or just use them as bodies for the census to give them additional congressional seats.
So Representative Lisenby has a bill file open to restrict, it's crazy that we even have to do this, but to restrict voting in the state of Utah to only citizens, right? Which, again, seems like we shouldn't have to do that.
How do we prove that if they're not
Well, she's
requiring
got it.
ID
She's
to
got the
vote?
bill draft open. I'm going to be the floor sponsor, so she's doing, all the major legwork on that.
Is it going to have voter ID required in that, though?
I'm sure there will be something. Again, I don't know. It's in drafting stages, so I don't know what that looks like. But there is this concern. Again, I think we all know someone who is not here legally, and they might be our friends or neighbors in our church and our schools. But there's this sense of fairness and not cutting in line. And, for people who have spent 15, 17, 20 years to get their citizenship. And I know that there's a provision for that in the Dignity Act. But, it's interesting because my grandpa came from Sweden to help build the Hoover Dam. And, but he came here the right way, the legal way. And again, when others come illegally, and for those who are good actors, and they essentially cut in line for these people who have been waiting a very long time, tried to obey the laws. But if we look historically, there's an article in Brookings, and it talks about how historically, I'm going to quote from this. It says, restricting the access to welfare has been a principle of American domestic policy since colonial times. So the federal law established in 1882 and strengthened in the early 20th century was that immigration officials should refuse entry to any non-citizen who appeared likely to become a, quote, public charge, and should report those who did, although actual deportations of public charges have been rare. So again, remember, you had to have a sponsor. And what's changed is that now, instead of having a sponsor and looking to make sure that people who come here aren't a drain to our system, we've gone the opposite way, right? You can go too far, right? There's this place between justice and mercy, but where people who are here illegally are receiving more entitlements and benefits than, let's say, our veterans or our own who are citizens of the country. And so, I think that would change the feelings about immigration, is if people came here and they weren't a drain to the state. If we weren't giving them all these entitlements and benefits, I think it would also reduce the numbers, only because if people know that they have to come here and work and do, bootstrap and do their own thing, that's going to turn away the people who would like to come here and just live off the fruits of someone
Just live
else's
off the
labor.
system. And
And that's not all. I mean, that's, I'm not saying, obviously we know that doesn't define all immigrants. We have wonderful immigrants. But it does it, right? These kind of programs attract I mean, if it's free, right? It's like a free lunch, a free meal, a free healthcare, free money to live.
Who
If
would
you
say
want
no
to
to that?
stop that, that's why people are, no one's trying to get into Venezuela or Cuba or Nicaragua. It's not happening. And they're not places people want to be. But we want to be friendly, but we don't want to be too friendly. We don't want to offer things, there's the whole principle of cast your bread upon the water, and, you work, the principle, the law of the harvest, that you reap what you sow. And when you skip those steps, work is ennobling. And we have our welfare programs to take care of the truly needy, the truly indigent, truly disabled, but not for fraudsters and not for people who want to live on the dole.
well, the social services program's got to be completely overhauled because there's a significant amount of waste, fraud, and abuse in those, just from our own people, not let alone the illegals. And
Correct.
DOJ came out with a report a couple months back that they found over 5 million illegals on our social services programs registered to vote and were voting. So this whole system's got to be completely overhauled. And I mean, I brought in my first wife, ex-wife now, legally, and like you were saying, I had to prove my income, and so that
It was a very rigorous process, yes.
So much so that, I mean, I was 22, 23-year-olds. I wasn't making a massive amount of income, and they came back and said my income wasn't enough, and so I had to put my parents on there.
Wow.
So my
like
parents,
guarantors,
and as the guarantors that she was not going to be a public burden.
Yep.
And yet, everybody's coming in and purposely being the public burden. They're at the border giving them checks for money and getting them on social service programs. California is actually openly advertising that, hey, we're going to give you in-state tuition, we're going to get you on Medicaid, we're going to get you on all these social service programs. Why wouldn't they go to there? Because that's just a heavy attractant for free stuff. And yet all of those that are trying to come across legally get thrown by the wayside. All those that need that assistance get thrown by the wayside. And our biggest thing is our veterans get thrown by the wayside because all of a sudden the illegal aliens are more important than even getting our veterans taken care of and helped. Right. And you have all these veteran programs that could use that money and they're not getting anything. They're pulling teeth to get a grant, and yet all this money just gets handed out.
Right.
One of my biggest concerns on this Dignity Act is it says it creates a 90-day family visitor visa for key life events. And so let's say you have a child that's getting born, you can have your family come up from Mexico or someone else to come visit. That's going to get abused. I mean, how many illegals are here that have overstayed their visas?
Right. Yeah, and that is one of the minuses that I was talking about, right, is we want to have, it's this fine balance, delicate balance between justice and mercy in this bill. And there are some good ideas. I love that it's bipartisan, right? You've got Florida and right, you've got Republicans and Democrats sponsoring it. I like that it's going to be funded by immigrant fees and not taxpayer dollars. I think that makes it
huge.
strong. I like the national E-Verify component. I like that it ends catch and release. So there are some good things in there, but there are some other things that I think might be too generous or might have unintended consequences, such as you mentioned.
I mean, the reality is, and we've said this in many podcasts, is, I mean, we have upwards of 40 million illegals in the country. I mean, close to 20 million.
The ones that we know about.
Yeah, close to 20 million were Biden administration alone from that border. The feasibility of deporting that many people is not feasible. We all know it's not going to happen.
Correct.
So we're going to get...
What is it, 2020 or 2021? I can't remember looking at the federal legislation that was proposed here, the Dignity Act. Oh, here it is. And it says the Dignity Program is available to undocumented immigrants who have been here since before December 31st, 2020.
So So the
Yeah.
last 5 years won't count. So they'd have to get deported anyway. But we all know it's not going to be feasible to deport that many people. So they're
But we
going
have to do something.
There's going to have to be a combination of both. There's going to have to be massive deportation, which is Trump's going to do, and then there's going to have to be something like this.
Right.
It's we put ourselves in this position on because of how we voted. The U.S. as a total. I mean, red states may not have voted for it, but we put ourselves in this position nonetheless. So there's going to have to be something that fixes it. And my biggest concern is path to citizenship or voters, because I don't want people voting themselves in more free stuff, voting themselves in more socialism, because that's all they've ever known in their previous countries. That's all they've ever had is socialism. So that's what they would vote in. Those are my key concerns. Now, we do have a lot of these people, and I know a lot of you guys know a lot of them. I've had, as a contractor, I had a lot of them working for me.
Sure.
And they're the best workers on the planet. I mean, I wanted them working me more than I wanted the homegrown people working for me, because they'd actually go out there and work without complaining. So there's that side of it, but the biggest concern is always going to come down to the left pushing for voters. So that can be a solution, but I think they've got to be very, very, very careful with that.
So do we expect any adjustments to it before it comes to vote?
Well, this is on the national level, not the state level. So it could
Right.
be.
Hopefully there are amendments, at those sticky points that we talked about. And I think that there will be, but again,
It's only a proposal right now, so it's not even
Yeah.
on the floor yet.
Yeah.
So it's not on the floor yet. Well, let's go to two other things real quick. And these are just, I want to get your opinion as a legislator on these.
Yeah.
So Texas right now is going through redistricting, and the Democrats down there are furious because the redistricting would essentially turn 2 blue areas red, because they'd put more conservatives into those blue areas. So the Democrats are so upset about it that they've left the state. Beto O'Rourke here is paying for them to leave the state. So he's paying for their flights, their hotels, their food, and the congressional people are supposedly getting a $500 a day fine, which he is also covering. If that were to happen here, what's your opinion? What would happen? What should happen?
I mean, I think people have their free agency and they can choose not to go, but the consequences should not be mitigated. So they should have to pay the fines.
As a
They should have
legislator,
to
as a
go through
senator,
that.
what is those consequences? I mean, they put out arrest warrants for him. I mean, what are the rules and laws behind that typically?
I've never not shown up. So fortunately, I'm not aware. I mean, I know when they, need to call, they do a call to the Senate, and then the ushers will literally go find, people and these kinds of things. So I'm not as familiar with how that happens in other states. But absolutely, the consequences should not be mitigated by taxpayer dollars. Those consequences should fall on the individual legislators for their individual behavior, and the consequences should not be mitigated. So they are free to make that choice and not show up, but they should not be free from the consequences that are codified in law or the financial
Well, the one of the consequences is their $500 a day fine, but they're not coughing that up out of their own pockets. So, so the billionaire O'Rourke is covering it all for them. Which is kind of a dilemma for the legislators down there if their stick just got taken away from them because of a billionaire's funding everything. With Utah laws, is that where they could literally go out and get arrested and forced to come back and pulled back?
That's my understanding. Again, fortunately, haven't had to be part of that.
Be fired if my employees decided they're not coming to work. We're going to leave until we just let you go. You're beholden to the taxpayer.
Yeah, I don't even like to go to the restroom when it's floor time. Unless it's an emergency, I am going to be there. If it's a tough vote, I'm going to take it. I'm not going to pass and say nothing. I'm not going to go take a walk in the hall. That's cowardice. and you were hired to do a job. My master's is in human resource management. These are not the kind of employees that I want. When do you need to when things are hard, and if they want to be at the table, right? They say if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. It makes no sense to me why they are not there.
Whether they like the legislation or not. I mean,
Right. You don't have to agree, but you need to be part of the discussion. Running away is not the answer.
and it's only temporary. They
Right.
can't run forever. I mean, what are you going to do? Postpone it a week, 2 weeks? It's going to happen anyway, whether you like it or not.
Next session, yeah.
So essentially, all they're doing is bringing publicity to it.
Correct.
Just like what they did when they tried to storm the ICE offices or tried to storm these detention facilities without notice and get the news media just all upriled and covering it nonstop 24/7. And they're hoping that publicity has a public outcry behind it that does something else. I don't know what they're looking for there, because even with public outcry, that's still not going to stop it. But last one, or second to last one, actually, similar thing happened down in Arizona. So you've got a public legislator, senator, state senator, just like you are, that is tipping off the public about ICE movements.
Wow.
Just telling them everything, what they're doing. She may be brought up on charges. So Arizona State Senator Annalise Ortiz is siding with the vicious cartels, human traffickers, and violent criminals over American citizens, says McLaughlin. Notifying the public about ICE law enforcement operations endangers law enforcement and weakens American national security. So, again, as a legislator, what do you think should happen there? What would happen if someone here in Utah were doing that?
You're literally obstructing justice. I know, are there bad law enforcement officers somewhere in each state? Probably. They're in every industry. There's bad actors in any industry. But these people are doing the job. They are following the law as it is written. The place to take the fight is with the legislation. Change the law. If you don't like the law, then you change the law. To me, it seems like a case of aiding and abetting, and there should be consequences. Again, this senator is free. She is free to do what she's doing, but she should not be free from those consequences.
My biggest fear is by letting people know where ICE is. We've already seen what the riots in California, stuff like that, and there's ICE agents getting harmed and getting rocks thrown at them, Molotov cocktails thrown at them. Their lives are getting threatened to the point where the ICE agents are actually going out completely masked because they can't let the public know who they are, because they'll follow them home, and then that endangers their family. And then Trump saw a lot of this thing, and I think he was on the Air Force One or something like that, he put out a tweet that says, "I'm giving full permission for ICE agents to arrest anybody that is throwing anything at you, throwing cocktails, damaging equipment." So they've now got authority to arrest people, but they shouldn't be in fear
Correct.
of harm or injury.
They should actually seek maybe litigation. They should sue her for endangering their life.
Absolutely. Yes. I have my opinion on this. If anything, I have more empathy. I'm not a law enforcement, but I am an elected public official, and I do receive emails and texts and phone calls. But before I was that, I had a little taste of what it is like to be at the federal level. Mia Love is the former Mia Love. So I tutored her son, Peyton. Sorry, it's really hard to talk about it right now. But I was there one day, and she'd been doxxed, and so her address was made public, and there was a guy, who said he had a gun, and she had glass windows, and we were told to get on our belly and go into the garage and drive out, and I went straight to the police station. I had to wait till she got home. But why you didn't hear about that story in the paper, because you don't want to give any glory to the perpetrators. And I know lieutenant governors had to have things. There's several people that they just don't like to talk about it, because they don't want to glorify the perpetrators. My former colleague and now Congressman Kennedy had his house painted, his home.
I remember.
And there are worse things. And our law enforcement officers are putting themselves right between us. They're the ones that are protecting us at the Capitol or on the streets. And it's horrific to me that someone would put them in harm's way.
Well, the rhetoric coming from the left is so thick. They're literally just defaming Trump. They're defaming these ICE agents to where it's fomenting this violence. They're almost like giving permission to people to go out and justifying this violence. I mean, that's why we had an assassination attempt on Trump. It's why we're having all these ICE agents being injured, is because their verbiage, what they're saying out in public, is so vitriol that it's virtually giving permission. I mean, they're trying to do everything but outright say, go and harm them. I mean, we had Maxine Waters a couple of years ago. You got to hit them in the streets. You got to hit them in the restaurants. You got to get out in front of their faces. And just
that's
fomenting this. Or who was it, the speaker that says, I'm going to take them behind the shed. I mean, it's just what they're saying is fomenting
that kind of language.
That kind of language is just aggravating
disgusting.
this.
Yeah, it's right. There's a way to protest, and it is our right as citizens, right? We talk about the First Amendment, and that is a sacred right, which I absolutely support. But this violence has no place in protests. There are many ways that we can utilize our free speech. Violence is not acceptable.
Well, we're coming down to the end of this thing, so the kind of the last thing I wanted to cover here real quick, and this is just kind of a off-the-cuff thing. There's new licensing law that took into place.
Yes. Yep.
That is making people get a fishing or hunting license to hike on trails. And there's a lot of uproar about that because people are like, why do I need to pay a license fee to walk on a trail?
Yes.
And somehow it passed. And I don't know if there's something I don't know about this law, because on the onset, looking at it from the bird's eye that we're looking at it, I would be completely and 100% against this. What do you know about this?
Well, I'll just say at the outset, yes. I looked at, a lot of these bills. It was you look at it, and there are lots of votes you take, and so people say, "Did you support that?" I said, "I don't know. Let me go look." Right, because it was one of many, and a lot of times it's, do I trust this legislator? Do I see any red flags? No. Okay. So again, I think we're going to see an amendment to this bill. I would not be surprised. I know that there's been chatter amongst the senators. I know there's been chatter amongst the House members on this bill. The good news is that some of the public outrage, again, not violent, nonviolent outrage, actually has changed it already since its inception. So the good news, the Bonneville Shoreline Trail and the Great Western Trail are open once again to runners, walkers, birdwatchers, bikers, non-motorized vehicles, basically, because people complained. So
did we just not understand that the trails were encompassed within these fishing areas?
Right.
Well, why would they try to...
Wildlife management areas, or WMAs. I actually just went, we did duck banding. And so we went out on a airboat at night, 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. And, again, I think, there's this sense of unfairness from some, right? They're saying, well, why don't they have to pay their fair share? But then there's others just like, this is public lands. Why can't I walk and be present? And I think they're both right. So
I think it's just another tax on the public.
Correct.
My personal opinion, just another tax on the
Correct.
public. Why am I getting charged to walk on public lands?
that is a great question that I would not be surprised to see this go away or be significantly altered.
How did it get enough steam, in your opinion?
Yeah.
How did it get enough steam to pass in the first place of people thinking that's going to be a good idea just to charge people to walk on trails?
I don't know. Sometimes these things are unintentional, right? They're unintended consequences. Like you write a code a certain way and then you realize, oh wait, that's going to affect. And then I think I believe, I don't know because I haven't spoken directly with the bill sponsor, if that was the intention or if that was the unintended consequence of making laws. And that often happens where you're like, oopsie. The fact that they've already changed some of it is, like I said, without a session, without anything like that, is really good signal in my, and I know in this area that's a good thing. So yeah, I think we're gonna see some changes in this upcoming session for sure, because there are a couple bills that have been talked about, but this is one where they got the policy wrong, and it's pretty obvious now, right, in retrospect and hindsight, to not only the legislators but the public. And the public was the first to figure it out, right? And which is great, which is why we want everyone involved, because we don't bat 100, right? We don't get it right all the time. And this one for sure, in my opinion, we got wrong. And I expect that we'll see some additional changes.
So you might see a full rescission on it. I mean, right now, the way it reads is the DWR owns, manages 148 wildlife management areas, waterfowl management areas, blah, 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 both known as WMAs. 25 of those are impacted by the new law, which means that in order to even walk on it, you have to go buy a $40 fishing and hunting license, which walk it, hike it, bike it.
Was it the sponsor that said we were hoping that some of these hikers might want to then, after they buy the license, maybe they'll take up fishing?
I did hear that
What?
excuse.
It's in the article.
Yeah, I did hear that. Yeah, I think I read that. I thought that was funny. I don't know that that's going to happen.
I enjoy fishing, but when I go hiking, I'm hiking.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are some other portions. It clarifies night hunting rules, how ranchers get reimbursed for livestock losses due to predators. I think whoever thought this up thought, maybe they were thinking like toll roads or something. If it's a user-based fee. But again, it's like, at what point do you pay to breathe air? And some of these things seem like they're onerous. And so I expect that we'll see some major changes on this one. There's been a lot of chatter on this one, trust me, internally, as well as
That's
externally.
awesome.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that, because the way I didn't even know about this, my daughter from college calls me up and said, "Did you hear about this?" I'm like, "Hear about what? How did you hear about something before I did?" First off,
Probably because she was
trying to hike.
raised in a family that is outdoorsy, and that's one of the main reasons that people move to our state is we love the great outdoors.
Yeah.
And I think I expect some changes. I don't know what they are, and I would assume that the bill sponsors would be, if they're going to take all the blame, they want to take all the credit for any changes as well. So we'll see what comes out.
We so appreciate you being here, and it's good to get to know you better.
You too, Ingrid.
Seeing you in common circles. And
well,
Yeah.
we'll definitely keep in touch, because you're a great senator. You got some great bills passed, and I greatly appreciate the emphasis you've put on the veterans.
You're
It's
welcome.
close to our hearts, because I've got all four of mine that are in or are one that's a veteran now.
Thank you.
So it's a huge sacrifice for them, and I know that my son doesn't want to wait till next year to get your new law passed. I would help him
Right.
this year, but we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, well, there could be a special session. There's a lot that could happen. So
Because that would dramatically help a lot of people if they could actually get that without all the fees, the costs, the extra
Right.
classes. Just, I already know how to do all this. Let's just do it in public sector now.
right.
well, maybe you'll have some viewer write in and offer him a job.
There you go.
Yeah, if you want
That's
to offer a
right.
job,
That's
that'd be
right.
great. That'd
Take
be great.
note.
Well, this is God and Country. Appreciate everybody being on this week. Please like, share, and subscribe. We need your support. We need the listening hours, so share it with your friends and family. Get us out there. Appreciate everybody. We'll talk to everybody next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
American